The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Where's the start button?
I started it, so you should be good.
No, where's the record button?
You have to go down to sharing.
It was there and then it disappeared.
Yeah, it was there, and I
Yeah.
had checked record. That's okay.
I got it.
You got it? Okay, good. Okay, good.
Got it.
You're on.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Looking forward to this next webinar. As some of you have been with us and some of you have not, I want to welcome those that have not been here before, and maybe more of you will join us. But we've reached a point in our series where we're not going to be actually teaching you how to delineate a chart and how to work with the charts as we've been doing up to this point. As a matter of fact, in the two books that DK has given us, one of them being Esoteric Astrology and the other one being the Labor of Hercules, he does not teach us how to delineate a chart. What he teaches us in these two books is to thoroughly understand how astrology actually works, because orthodox astrology really is so superficial when you know the difference. He wants us to know the meanings of all the signs, which in fact are constellations, and constellations are alive. So he wants us to understand the meaning behind the signs. He wants us to understand the meaning behind the planets, their relationships, how they work, the dynamics between them, and how they in turn may affect us. And so what we are trying to convey to you is the deeper understanding of all these signs and these planets, and what it is that we have to learn from each one of the signs. With that in mind, what we're going to be doing in this webinar is we're going to be dividing it up in half. The first half will be talking to you about the Labor of Hercules, which the Tibetan spends a lot of time teaching us metaphorically the various lessons that have to be learned in the signs, and he does this through the initiate Hercules. The second half of the webinar will be quite a quick overview or a summary of everything that you have been taught thus far. So it'll all be in one document. And for those of you who wish to volunteer later on to do your chart with us, and then you give us your understanding of your chart, and then we fill in with more stuff. This is an excellent document that you'll be able to download from Akara and use that as a summary. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand the mic over to BL.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to start with just a couple of generic slides on why we study the Hercules myth. It's the progress of the disciple is actually illustrated for us in the heavens through these labors. DK tells us that at the front of the book. And as Hercules goes through the 12 different signs, we learn so much. But that progress isn't just limited to disciples like Hercules. We all can learn the signs by reading about his journey, because we all have each of these signs in our chart. Some, of course, are better represented than others, but they are all there. And the lessons that we learn are first the lower expression of each sign, and we see Hercules go through these lower expressions, and then eventually, after many, many lifetimes, we all face the lessons that Hercules recapitulates for us as a disciple in his journeys here. So that's why we study the Hercules. And then I also wanted to point out that there is a definite link between the myth and the sign. There's various different mythology books, and they have variations on these myths. Some are done in different order than those that Alice Bailey and DK give us. But The symbolic story is what's really important to us, showing us the everyday tests of each sign. Signs provide us with distinctive forces and tendencies, and when we understand that, the test of each sign emerges for us, whether we're new on the path or whether we're a disciple. So I'm going to cover 4 signs today, Aries through Cancer, and I've got about 10, 12 minutes per sign. So what I'd ask is that you hold your questions until the end of each sign, and then I'll ask if there are any questions. So, okay. This is the Aries myth. The labor was to capture the man-eating mares. Diomedes was the son of Mars, and he raised horses and mares of war. The horses were wild and fierce, and they ravaged up and down the land, causing great damage. They killed anyone who crossed their path, and they bred constantly. Hercules was commanded to capture these mares and stop their ravaging behavior and rescue the people in the land from these terrorizing and destruction of these mares. Hercules wanted his good friend Abderus to go with him, so they faced the task together. Hercules laid out the plans, they followed the horses, and after a time he was able to capture and tether the mares. Hercules rejoiced with joy at his success, but then he left the horses in Abderus's care, because Hercules thought it was beneath his dignity to drive the horses in. But Abderus was weak and he feared the horses, and the horses sensed this. He couldn't hold the mares, and they turned on him and they killed him before they escaped again. Hercules was grief-stricken. He was very discouraged, and he was humbled by this experience. So he hunted and captured the mares a second time so he could fulfill his task. And so this first labor, it was done. It was not only a partial failure, which is often the case with inexperienced and impetuous aspirants, but it resulted in the death of his friend, didn't it? Aries is a sign of commencement. Whether it's the aspirant to discipleship, it's a period of reorientation and renewed self-conscious effort. It marks the first step upon the path. Aries is a sign of outgoing power, whether the streaming forth of divine energy from the central deity or from the human being. This energy streams forth in 2 directions, so the point becomes the line. One stream of energy expresses the path of return, evolution. The other is of incarnation, and experience, and the 2 constitute our existence. So it shows our becoming a subjective being, working with the form and the personality, and also our reorganization, reorientation, repolarizing, and regeneration as we begin to express soul qualities. The 2 uses of force are dependent on the mental attention of the being, divine and human, using it. It's the same force, but it's used in 2 different ways. For eons, this life force has been selfish, only satisfying our own desire. But little by little, the form life loses its attraction until, having passed around and around the wheel, the man finds himself back again in Aries, only this time with that new focus, fresh interests, and a totally different vision. He has learned his own essential duality and yearns to meet the need of the higher expression. He begins to respond to impulses coming from the world of souls and to vision group objectives. Aries governs the head. It is consequently the sign of the thinker and a powerful mental sign. All beginnings originate on the mental plane and in the mind of the Creator, whether it's God or the Son of Man, the soul of man, I'm sorry. In Aries, he learns right direction and right orientation, and the newly thinking disciple begins his work. The horse stands for intellectual activity. The white horse symbolizes the illumined mind of the spiritual man. Black horses represent the lower mind, with its false ideas. The brood mares indicate the feminine aspect of the mind, as it gives birth to ideas, theories, and to concepts. The thought form making tendency of the mind is symbolized here, embodying the ideas conceived that we all let loose on the world, devastating and destroying when they come from the lower mind, but constructive and saving when they come from the soul. We're going to look at the journey in a little different context for each one of these myths. The exoteric ruler is Mars, so Hercules, acting under the right direction of thought and beginning his work on the mental plane, he takes his stand as the warrior now, as a pioneering, militant spirit. The mares, they belong to Diomedes, who was the son of Mars. But the esoteric ruler is Mercury, which illumines the mind and mediates between the soul and personality. So the higher use of the mind is needed here to get those brood mares under control. Hercules had to begin in the world of thought to gain the mental control. For ages, the brood mares of thought had been breeding wrong thought, wrong speech, erroneous ideas, and that's why they were so destructive. One of the first lessons that every beginner has to learn is the tremendous power that he wields mentally and the amount of harm that he can cause in his neighborhood and environment through the brood mares of his mind. He has to learn the right use of his mind, and that means he has to capture this feminine aspect of the mind and see to it that no more war horses are bred. Selfishness, unkindness, love of gossip, and criticism constitute a large part of the brood mares of the mind, and they are constantly fed by selfishness and illusion. They represent the worst of our nature. Hercules realized the harm that the brood mares were doing. He rushed gallantly to the rescue of his neighborhood. He determined to capture the brood mares, but he overestimated himself. He failed to realize their potency and strength, so he gave them to Abderus, who is the symbol of the lower personal self. But Hercules, the soul, and Abderus, the personality, in unison were needed to guard these devastating horses. Abderus alone was not strong enough, and they killed him. The soul, in the person of Hercules, had to deal with the problem of wrong thought. And only when he becomes that one-pointed aspirant in the sign Sagittarius, and in that sign kills the man-eating birds, does he really attain complete control of the thought processes of his nature. Now, we've looked at Aries before in a variety of contexts, but now let's look at it in relation to what we've learned through the labor. Aries is initiating. It's creative process working out, first directed towards material things and later towards a higher purpose. Negative traits can include arrogance, stubbornness, impulsiveness. Arians start many projects, but they leave many of them without finishing them. Positive traits includes courage, liveliness, mental acumen, and an adventurous spirit. The esoteric concepts are learning the right use of the mind and life force with unselfish intent, gaining control over wrong thought, wrong speech, and wrong action. Aries has Mars as the exoteric ruler, and a keynote from the angle of form is let form again be sought. Mars impulsively ventures forth, fiery and idealistic, quick to fight for whatever that ideal might be. Through war and continual strife, the necessary experiences and purifications will eventually take place. Mercury is the esoteric ruler, and the keynote from the angle of the soul is now, I come forth, and from the plane of mind I rule. Mercury's illuminating principle releases the mind and directs the life. The person becomes conscious of the underlying soul in all things, in all situations, in all people, and he reorients his attitude and thinking accordingly. The switch is from doing for the sake of doing to mental control of the physical form for the work of the soul. Aries is the will to create, establishing mental control, and its polar opposite is Libra, which is about achieving continual balance through mental control. They form a dynamic axis that eventually needs to be balanced, as we have to do with all axes. And then we recognize that they're the same line, that they have a joint purpose. And in this case, the purpose is establishing balance, mental control, and soul control over the personality. Okay, that's it for Aries. Does anybody have any questions about Aries before I move on to Taurus? Well, I don't see any, so let's move on. Okay.
Just a moment, just a moment. What I'd like to add is, you know, it's so interesting to see how these labors have these symbols that are they're so good. I mean, a horse, when you think about a horse, they put blinders on a horse because a horse will run wild, has absolutely no sense of direction where it's going. It'll go over a cliff if it's running very, very fast without the use of the mind. So the whole idea of reining in the horses with a rein and keeping it focused with the blinders is the very, very thing that Aries needs to do, right? Aries is all about impulsiveness, running wild. It's the desire nature. And it's only later on when the mind steps in that you can control, like the reins of a horse, the very thing that tends to run wild, which is our desire nature. So how perfect is this symbol of the horse for Aries? So I'm always amazed at the well, it's more than coincidence. It's just beautiful how we've been given these symbols to represent what it is that we need to learn. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. And we're going to see that exact thing, even more so when we look here at Taurus. But you're right. It happens in every single one of them, whether it's the symbol of the ram here or the symbol of the horses in the story. It is so true. And that's what makes the Labors of Hercules so rich, because of these symbols that we have throughout the stories. Okay, so here we go with Taurus. The labor was to capture the Cretan bull. So at this point, he had just lost his friend, so he was very saddened. But Hercules set out to find the sacred bull. No instructions were given as to how he was to do this, and all he knew about this task was that the bull was sacred, that it was born from the sea, and that its destiny was to be offered in sacrifice to King Minos of Crete. Hercules searched all over the island, pursuing the bull from place to place in that great maze, guided by the light shining from the bull's forehead. At last he cornered it, and using the light shining from the bull, he rode the bull across the water to the city of the Cyclops. 7 sisters were singing and urging him on his journey, and 3 Cyclops awaited him at the holy place, watching his progress. "He comes with strength," said Brontes, and he went to meet Hercules on the shore. "He rides in light," said Steropes. "His inner light will be brighter." "He comes with speed," said Argus. "He is riding through the waves." Hercules drew nearer, urging the sacred bull upon the way, throwing the light upon the trail. He reported back to his teacher that the task was done, and he was told that he must walk in the light and see the light, and that his own light must shine brighter. He was also told by his teacher that while this labor was easy for Hercules, it taught him the lesson of proportion. He needed strength to perform hard tasks, a willingness to do tasks that might not really tax his strength, and that both things are necessary. The eye of the bull in Taurus is, of course, the magnificent fixed star Aldebaran. And when it referred to the 7 sisters in the previous slide, those are the Hyades who are on the shoulder of the bull, right? So this magnificent star Aldebaran is actually the reason why this constellation is regarded as conferring illumination. The consummation of the work that is undertaken in Taurus and the result of this Taurian influence is the glorification of matter and subsequent illumination. All that prevents the glory of the soul's radiance is the form. And when the aspirant has purified and spiritualized that form, then the light of the soul can shine brightly. In line with the universal law, Hercules began his work on the mental plane. In the working out of the creative plan, thought impulse is followed by desire. The key to the labor of Taurus is the right understanding of the law of attraction that governs the magnetic force, the principle of coherence which builds forms and through which the soul manifests. It produces the stability, creating persistence of the form, and it concerns the interrelation between the builder and the form itself, between positive and negative, between spirit and matter, between the self and the not self. In other words, between the pairs of opposites, right? The soul eventually learns to ride the form, controlling and mastering it, as Hercules did here with the bull. We all learn to recognize that relationships are important, but we need to understand the purpose of these relationships, whether it's with human beings, a spouse, siblings, friends, even strangers, or whether it's the relationship with ourself, our soul and personality. Through right use of the form and right understanding of purpose, through right orientation to reality and right use of spiritual energy, the soul will become the controlling factor and the whole body will become full of light. Through control, through the use of common sense, and by identification with group purpose, the disciple arrives at liberation from the control of sex. He follows the example of Hercules and learns to ride the bull of desire over the mainland, where in the temple he hands it over to the care of the Cyclops, who represent early initiates, and they have the eye of Shiva, the bull's eye, in the middle of their forehead. Hercules himself was not only the disciple, but he was in his lower nature the bull, and in his higher nature he was the Cyclops. And each one of those Cyclops stood for the 3 aspects of God. Brontes means thunder, and it's the symbol of the first aspect of God, the Father who spoke. It is the creative sound. Steropes means lightning or light, and that's the second aspect, the soul. Argus means whirling activity. That's the third aspect, expressing itself in the intense activity of the physical plane life. These divine aspects constitute the controlling factor, and once they've gained possession of the sacred bull, the problem of Hercules is solved. The disciple, like Hercules, is a separated unit, divided from the mainland, which is the symbol of the group. He's divided by the world of illusion and the maze that he lives in. The bull of desire has to be caught and mastered and chased from one point to another in the life of that separated self until the time comes when the aspirant can do what Hercules succeeded in doing, and that's riding the bull. To ride an animal in ancient myths signifies control. I think it still does. Look at the Bronco riders. The bull here is not slaughtered. It is ridden and guided under the mastery of man. The broad lesson to be learned in this sign is to achieve right understanding of the law of attraction and right use and control of matter. The aspirant is tested in two ways. First, as to the caliber of his animal nature and the motives underlying its utilization. Second, he is tested as to the attraction which the great illusion can exert over him. Maya, or the great illusion, and sex are but two aspects of the same force, that of attraction. One as it manifests on the physical plane, and the other as it is expressed in the field of the emotional desire nature. We're given some suggestions from controlling desire with this myth. Ride, control, and master the bull, and let the aspirant remember that the bull has to be ridden across the waters to the mainland, which means he subordinates his separate personal self to group purpose. The other thing is to use common sense. Use the mind and intelligent perception to guide and control desire. A clean mind, a pure heart, a rightly organized and used physical body, conformity to the laws of the land in which he lives, consideration for the welfare of those with whom he is associated, and a life of loving service are the ideals for any aspirant. And then we have the summary of the sign. Taurus is all about desire for average man. It is will or directed purpose for the disciple. Negative traits can be stubbornness, self-indulgence, laziness, and possessiveness. Positive traits are dependability, practicality, patience, persistence, and independence. Esoteric concepts are illumination, applying knowledge and experience towards spiritual aspirations. Taurus has Venus as the exoteric ruler, and a keynote from the angle of form is let struggle be undismayed. Venus here represents the want of finer things and of beauty, also the feminine aspect of sex. But eventually we discover that the physical act of sex has to be elevated to its rightful place. It is really just the symbol of our inner duality that needs to be transcended and unified. And we do this through illumination and transcendence of our consciousness. Vulcan is the esoteric ruler, and the keynote from the angle of the soul is now, I see, and when the eye is opened, all is illumined. Vulcan stands for the soul, that inner spiritual man, He has to fashion his own weapons to succeed, find his own inner truth. The switch here is from the selfish and baser desires to illumination and greater love of humanity and recognizing the soul in others. Taurus's desire for aspiration and growth of the soul light, and its polar opposite is Scorpio, which is about the conflict of duality and desire overcome. The axis eventually needs to be balanced, as they all do, so that we learn to use the wisdom of the light of the soul to overcome desire through right thought, right action, and right relationships. Okay, any question on that before I move on?
Oh, there's a hand.
Yay!
Michael.
Hi, Eva. Hi, BL.
Hi.
I was wondering, there are 3 other constellations given for each of the signs of the zodiac in these labors, and might they provide additional insight into each of these 12?
Of course.
And if so, what? How can we obtain that greater insight?
Okay, that might be a project for another time. It is actually beyond the scope of a beginner esoteric astrology, but yes, he does give us those other constellations. And as you know, Nicholas has done a lot of extensive work in the constellations, and he considers these constellations to be like decanates. Working with this. So, of course, it's going to take you deeper into this, but that's more of an advanced esoteric astrology class.
Okay.
So it's a little beyond our scope here, but yes, thank you for A, noticing, and B, reading the full text in the book, because it is quite instructive, isn't it?
Truly.
Yes.
It's like one of those books, well, all of the books should be read monthly.
Well, and we have someone here who uses the, one of our other attendees, her and her study group, they go through, and every year they read the Labors of Hercules as part of their monthly full moon process. I myself did that for many, many years, because you can continue to read this. You can continue to read the particular sign in esoteric astrology, and every time you read it, you get something new out of it. So,
Absolutely.
So
that is so true, both of you. It's so true, because you know how many years I have been doing this, and I continue doing this. At the new moon, I read the labor. At the full moon, I read what DK tells us about the sign. So I do a lot of reading on that every single month. Oh, the odd time I might skip a month, but I feel very guilty when I do. But yeah. All it does is it clarifies, it makes you understand the deeper things about each sign in a way that a perusal reading just doesn't give you.
And for me, it helps in being able to present these concepts to others, not necessarily in esoteric language, but I try to do it in language that others will understand.
Sure. I now that I have the podium here for a moment, I would like to add a few more thoughts along with this labor. On the most exoteric, mundane level, and I've thought about this a lot, why is the bull always the one that's used bullfights and with the matador? It's the bull. And the only thing I can think of is how instinctual both the bull behaves and the matador. I don't think the matador has time to really think. I don't think he has time to analyze his next move. It's all instinct. And that's what the bull represents for us in the sign of Taurus. It's the instinctual desire nature. Of course, the matador wants to win, and the bull is just acting in the most instinctual way. And then I look at the attraction, which is one of the qualities associated with this sign, and how attracted the bull is to this flapping red piece of material. I don't even know if he actually sees color or if he sees movement, but in any event, he is attracted. He has no way of pulling himself away. He's constantly moving towards that. So those two qualities, or characteristics is a better word here, are so deep within the sign of Taurus. So that was one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing is taking the symbolism that has been talked about a little bit in the very first slide, a little bit deeper or further out. Taurus is often associated with Pleiades, and the Pleiades are often referred to as the Seven Sisters. And the Pleiades form the hub of the wheel, and the hub of the wheel can be seen as a bullseye, right? So we can put all these associations together. And then there were the three. BL, you mentioned the three. Well, the Pleiades represent the third aspect. So you get the three in terms of the third aspect associated with the Pleiades. Anyway, that was just another little piece that I thought I would share.
Thank you. Yvonne has her hand up, and I'll get to you in just a second, Yvonne. But what I wanted to say was, yes, when you were talking about the bull, what I think of is the bull as the male side of the Taurus equation. And of course, Venus is that female side. So, and the purpose, the whole purpose is to marry the two in that higher level. So, okay, let's go to Yvonne and see what. Go ahead, please.
Hi, BL and
Hi.
Eva. Yeah, ever since BL gave a webinar about 5 or 6 years ago in the Labors of Hercules for the students every month. And from that time on, I do have a full moon meditation group, and it's part of our group that we read that every month, and it all sounds new. I mean, I have about 10 to 15 people that come to this, and a lot of them aren't doing any formal esoteric studies. Some are accountants, nurses, stuff like that, just people I meet that have some spiritual interest. But it brings it down to a level that they can understand without esoteric training, which is great. And then we have like a discussion after it, before we do the meditation, about what the lessons are. So I really like it. But I have a question on these that I've never quite understood. Like, I'm a Libra sun sign, so my opposite is Aries. So the polar opposites, how do you balance these? And like this one is, Taurus, and the polar opposite is a Scorpio. But I'm not really quite sure in my mind after all this time, how do you balance both of these out?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay. You have to learn to balance it. That is part of it. First thing you have to do with opposites is recognize the two opposites themselves and recognize their purpose. And so, as I said, Taurus is that aspiration and growth of its desire and aspiration and growth of the soul light. And Scorpio is conflict of duality and desire overcome. So when you look at the two of them together, the higher purpose of both of them, being balanced and then merged, becomes using the wisdom of the light of the soul to overcome desire through right thought, right action, and right relationships. In other words, it's not working from either one of the extremes, but working from that, looking at it as one line, as the middle of the line, as that balance that you work with between the two of them. You're basically okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Eva.
No, you were not done. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you basically have to balance all of the 12 signs, all of the 6 lines, the 6 axes, and then you work from the hub, from the middle of the wheel. But we do it one axis at a time, one axis at a time. Okay, go ahead.
We tend to want to balance the luminaries, the signs that the luminaries are in, because those are the ones that are most prominent within us. Now, using Libra and Aries is really an easy one to see how you balance the two. Like you, I'm a Libran, and so I've had to learn to work with Aries. Librans, as we all know by now, likes to be liked, and wants people to think well, and therefore Librans go out of their way to be social, to be diplomatic, to be nice, right? One of the things that they need to learn is an Aries quality of assertiveness, the Aries quality of the strength that Aries many times will show. Aries, on the other hand, has to use the mind, which Libra has. Libra is an air sign. It has to use the mind of Libra in order to then be able to work with the two together and not be that impulsive, but think things out. So you can see how the marriage between the two can really, really work well. The one needs to learn what the other one has, and vice versa. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you both.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on into Gemini. I hope you guys like these little cartoons. I don't know where I found them, but I just thought they were so cute. Okay, so this labor, the Gemini labor, is the golden apples of the Hesperides. Okay, so with confidence, Hercules sets out on his third labor. He's sure of himself, his wisdom, and his strength. He searched north, but he did not find the tree, so he continued on. The teacher, watching, sent Nereus as a guide to help him. Nereus tried a variety of subtle ways to help Hercules, but he failed to understand, and Hercules ignored Nereus. He actually failed one of the minor tests of this labor, and that was to listen to his guide. Hercules turns to the south, the dark place. That's our past, and here is the symbol of going back into the world, the opposite pole of spirit. Hercules, still hoping for a quick success, he meets Antaeus, who's the serpent who guards the tree, and he wrestles with him. Thinking that he's near, Hercules hopes his strength will overcome the serpent. But he can't beat Antaeus, and he asks himself why. Trying one more time with all his might, he grasped the serpent with both hands, and he lifted it high into the air. He could not overcome it when he was earthbound. He had to overcome the physical and lift it into the air to defeat it. Fitting, since Gemini is an air sign. The second of the minor tests was just passed. Confident, he goes on, renewed with courage, and he turns to look in the west, where he meets total disaster. He meets Busiris. He's an arch deceiver and a false teacher. Busiris deludes men through words of seeming wisdom, claiming to know the right truth. Hercules bought it completely. He was looking for the easy way, and he became trapped for a whole year to this false teacher. He grew weaker and weaker with the false teacher until one day Busiris chains Hercules to an altar. Finally, Hercules recalls some words that Nereus told him long ago, and that truth and strength lie within him. When Hercules turned inward towards the soul, he finally is able to break the chains. He passed another one of the little minor tests. Hercules resumes his search for the apples. He's chastened, but he's wiser, and suddenly he hears a cry of distress. He's already behind on his search, and he has to think about what another delay is going to cost him. But with another cry for help, Hercules springs into action. Prometheus is chained to a rock with vultures eating his liver, slowly killing him. Hercules frees Prometheus. He chases the vultures off, and then he tended to Prometheus's wounds. The watching teacher, silent up to this point, told Hercules that he'd passed the fourth minor test and that there had been no delay in his journey, because when you learn to serve, it never delays your progress. Hercules again resumes his search for the apples, north, south, and west, but to no avail. Finally, a passerby points him in the right direction, and he heads on his way, east, seeing his goal at last. But then he finds Atlas, struggling under the heavy load of the world on his back. Atlas was in agony. Forgetting his search, Hercules rushes forward. He removes the load from Atlas's shoulder to his own, and in shouldering his brother's burden, the load rolled off, and both men stood free. Before him stood the grateful giant, apples in his hand, offering them with love to Hercules. The three sisters were also there with more apples, telling him the way to the apples is always through service. So, what do we learn about this myth? First, we all go through this mystical stage. It's going inward for a long period of time. And then we become ready for the occult phase. What we learn here is that this myth is that the mystic must add both occult knowledge and achievement to his life, and he can't remain a spiritual recluse. As the mystic, he learned to listen to his inner guide. Took him a while, didn't it? But as the occultist, he has to gain knowledge through his five senses, opening him up to new and greater awareness of his surroundings and his place in them. He becomes a man of action who is learning to transmute knowledge into wisdom. He's being able to apply the knowledge wisely to the problems that he encounters in his life. He learns to integrate his lower self into his higher self. First, he becomes a strong personality, but that personality is still flawed. He has to learn to conquer glamour and illusion, as was represented by Busiris here in this labor. And then he has to learn selflessness in his action. Despite his failures and long delays, Hercules did eventually obtain wisdom, but only after giving up his personal search in that selfless service. The apples, like in the Garden of Eden, symbolically represent knowledge of duality, of good and evil, the pull of the opposites, the nature of the soul, the good, and the form, evil, if it's going to hinder the soul. The test of glamour and illusion was dispelled, and he was able to continue on his search, and he finds delay again with Prometheus. But what was it his teacher told him? There has really been no delay. Serving and helping others hastens our progress. And then came that final test to help Atlas. Hercules is so overwhelmed by Atlas's suffering that he forgets his search for the golden apples. And in that self-forgetfulness, he passed the real test. So his progress here was at first subjective. It was characterized by much thought and desire. We saw this work out for him, as it does for all of us, on the physical plane until he learned about himself as a personality. This is a stage that we all go through. Then he begins to truly gather the apples of knowledge. He recognizes the duality of man, the personality versus the higher self, the soul. And he learns to subordinate the personality to the soul. He does this by getting his three lower vehicles under control: the body, the desire nature, and the mind. This makes him a strong personality. Then he continuously develops the soul nature, the higher aspect in the mind, the higher aspect of his personality nature. He looks for clarity in perception. He's no longer clouded by glamour or delusion. He cultivates love for all people and wisdom to discern the soul in others. He actively becomes involved in service to humanity. And that brings us to the summary for Gemini. Gemini represents duality, love, wisdom, and fluidity. It governs the control of every pair of opposites. The underlying love of deity reaches our solar system through Gemini. Negative traits: inconsistency, superficiality, indecisiveness, lack of focus, and nervousness. Positive traits include versatility, enthusiasm, eloquence, wit, and intellect. Esoteric concepts are dual aspects of the mind as it mediates between the higher and lower expressions. It is the intermediary between the soul and body, as we see depicted by the mortal and immortal twins of Gemini, Castor and Pollux. Gemini has Mercury as the exoteric ruler, and a keynote from the angle of form is "let instability do its work." Mercury works here as the dual expression of the mind, as it mediates between the concrete mind and the personality. In his higher function, he can carry the messages between the soul and brain, establishing right relations with the higher self. Venus is the esoteric ruler, and the keynote from the angle of soul is now, "I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self I grow and glow." Venus here awakens the true understanding of duality, the conflict between desire and spiritual will, between the personality and the soul. The switch here is from lower mental activity to a higher mental activity and a greater perspective, from vacillating from one opposite to the other to recognizing the important relationship between all opposites. Gemini is control of the opposites and synthesized at one-ment. Its polar opposite is Sagittarius, which is about one-pointed preparation for initiation. And the axis that eventually needs to be balanced and then harmonized is establishing control of the opposites and resolving duality for use in that one-pointed spiritual action. So, any questions about Gemini here? Eva, did you want to add
There
something?
doesn't seem to be any question. There doesn't seem to be any hands up.
No,
So-
there doesn't. Except, remember, Michael is a triple Gemini.
Yes, I know. So here, Michael, take some of these symbols that I'd like to talk about. Actually, this is loaded with symbolism, this whole labor. The first thing, we know it's the third sign, and number 3 is talked about. It's also the third vehicle that is illumined again here for us, and that's the mind. And Gemini, we know, is air, and it's ruled by Mercury, which again is mind, and Venus too is mind. So we can't help but recognize how much mind there is involved in all of this. The other symbol is the false teacher. Oh my gosh, have I come across that in my lifetime? How people are enamored with someone they think knows who is the teacher. And it isn't until they start to use their mind to truly discriminate that they recognize that this is really not This is not the real thing. Think about the cults and all the people that get involved in cults. These are all, in a way, false teachers, are they not? So I have seen this time and time again, getting caught up with the false teacher. Now, the other thing that I find very interesting here is, just drawing a blank, the one that was tortured with the pecking of the bird. Just name it for me. Prometheus. Thank you. Prometheus, in our allegory, represents the fire of the mind that Prometheus stole for humanity. And it's interesting that this is related to mind again, and to the mental capacity that this sign represents. So the fire of mind here was kind of chained and not allowed the freedom until he was set free to be able to, again, use the mind for service and for helping Atlas and helping other people. So there's a lot of symbolism here. If I really spent a lot of time, there's so many other things we could say, but that's enough for now.
Okay, thank you.
How about freedom from the concrete mind?
Absolutely. There you go. Because you got Mercury.
We can become so entranced with learning and knowledge and forget to use it lovingly, which brings in wisdom.
Right. And Mercury being the messenger between the higher and the lower. So yeah, absolutely.
Right, and that's part of the mystical stage, staying in the cave, hidden with all of the books, learning and learning and learning. You have to apply it. And that's part of what this labor was about too. So thank you. Okay,
Right.
Yvonne has her hand up too. Go ahead, please,
One
Yvonne.
of the things I loved about this one was when you said, and I didn't remember this, that service causes no delay in your development. I don't know if it's just spiritual or personality or what, or just the soul, or are they talking about the personality? But that's really great when I say, I don't have time to do this, I have too much to do, I don't have time to do this and this and this in service. And then, like you said, it causes no delay in my development. I have to remember that one.
Yeah, I like that one too because, I have a Leo sun and an Aquarian earth, and I've always thought that my gravitation towards service of different kinds has been as a result of me being able to relate to my Aquarian earth. But in reality, it could be part of my Gemini ascendant as well, because that's exactly what this says. It gets you out of studying for studying's sake and forces you to use it, really, doesn't it? And it is never a delay in your soul's progress, is what we're told here in this. So that's a good thing. I like that one too.
And I haven't seen anyone doing as much service as you. You're on every webinar I ever go on.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I think what we'll do is move on now to Cancer, the last one, and then Eva will finish up for us with the brief. Isn't that cute? I just really love those. Okay. So this labor was to capture the doe. He stands in deep silence, observing the landscape around him. He sees the shrine of Apollo, and on a nearby hill, the fawn that he is hunting. As he watched, he heard the voices of Artemis, who is the goddess of the moon, warning him that the doe belonged to her, and he was not to touch it. Then Diana, who is the goddess of the forest, claimed the doe as hers. The two of them, Artemis and Diana, they argued back and forth, each claiming possession of the doe. Hercules, still standing between the pillars of the gate, listened to the quarrel, wondering about the two maidens, and then he heard another commanding voice tell him that the doe belonged to the shrine. and neither maiden. And so he listened to this new voice, and he was instructed to rescue the doe and take it to the shrine. So he started on his journey, Artemis and Diana watching him, hampering his hunt whenever he got close. They deluded Hercules, throwing him off as he chased the doe from point to point. For a year he followed the doe, catching glimpse of it only to lose it again, until finally he found it weary and sleeping beside a pool of water in the forest. He quietly crept up on it and shot an arrow, hitting the doe's foot and wounding it. He picked the doe up in his arms, and he held it close to his heart while Artemis and Diana watched. He cried in exultation that the doe was his, but then he heard that other voice again, the voice of his teacher, reminding him the doe belongs to no one and commanding him to carry it to the shrine. Hercules asked why, and the teacher told him that as a son of God, he dwelled within the shrine, and he needed to bring the doe there for everyone else who shared the shrine. So Hercules takes the doe to the holy shrine of Mykenæ. Artemis asked why Hercules could enter the temple, but not Diana and Artemis. Apollo answered that it was because Hercules bore the doe in his arms close to his heart, and he left the doe in the holy place for others to share. And Hercules, returning from the test, told his teacher the task was fulfilled, was simple, except for the time that it took. He said the doe was in the holy place, close to the heart of God, but also close to Hercules' own heart. His teacher told him to look again, and sure enough, beyond the gate on a nearby hill, stood a new fawn. Again and yet again, he was told, must all the sons of men, who are the sons of God, seek for the golden antlered fawn and bear it to the holy place. Again and yet again. So Cancer, it's a mass sign, and the influences bring about formation of the human family, of the human race, of the human nations, of the family unit. In Cancer, he gets his first touch of that universal sense, which is the higher aspect of mass consciousness. 3 words summarize the conscious aspect of the evolving human. That's instinct, intellect, and intuition. Cancer is predominantly the sign of instinct, but instinct has to be lifted up, and when it has been transcended and transmuted, it manifests as intuition, symbolized in the myth by the doe. The intermediate stage is that of intellect. The great need of Hercules in Cancer is to develop his intuition and to become familiar with that instantaneous recognition of truth and reality, which is the higher perspective. There are no sharp distinctions between the various aspects of man's nature, instinct, intellect, and intuition. They're varying aspects of consciousness, of response to the environment and to the world that we live in. Instinct is the consciousness of the form, and it's the mode of awareness of the form. Artemis, the moon, rules the form. Man is also rational. He can analyze, criticize, and he possesses a mind, and that faculty of intellectual perception and response which opens him up to new fields of awareness. Diana, the huntress, claimed the doe because to her the doe is the intellect, and man is the great seeker, the great hunter before the Lord. But the doe had yet another more elusive form, and Hercules as the aspirant also looked for this. For a life cycle, Hercules hunted, represented in the myth as a year. Finally, he captured the doe, and following his spiritual intuition, he carried it into the temple, where it was claimed by the sun god Apollo. Hercules was sent to capture the doe, something elusive and difficult to secure. And there is no success for the aspirant until he has transformed instinct via intellect into intuition, and then instinct is subordinated to both. We're told that the battle is still going on between Apollo, the sun god, who knew that the doe was intuition, Diana, the huntress of the heavens, who knew it was intellect, and Artemis, the moon, who thought that it was only instinct. The problem of all disciples is to use the instinct correctly, in its right place, in its proper way. He must learn to use the intellect, and through it become conscious of the world of human ideas in research, and then learn to carry that capacity into the temple of the Lord, and there to transmute it to intuition, and through the intuition become aware of the spiritual realities which neither instinct nor intellect can reveal to him. And again, the sons of men must recapture these spiritual realities upon the endless way. And so, then we have the Cancer summary. It's mass sensitivity for average man, mass identification with the form. For a disciple, it becomes service to the masses. Negative traits, moodiness, being too clingy, highly emotional, suspicious, can have a tendency to nag. Positive traits, imagination, intuition, loving compassion, and protectiveness. The esoteric concepts are development of the intuition and a sensitive response to our environing conditions. It includes psychic development of both the lower and higher senses, and learning to transmute instinct to intuition, emotional reactions to inclusive love. Cancer has the moon as the exoteric ruler, and the keynote from the angle of form is let isolation be the rule, and yet the crowd exists. DK explains to us in Esoteric Astrology that with the moon and Neptune, we have the symbols of a close relationship. Oops, I missed Neptune as the esoteric ruler. In the keynote, I build a lighted house and therein dwell. So DK explains to us that the moon and Neptune have the symbols of a close relationship between the mother of all forms and the god of the waters, which represents the synthesis of form and desire sensitivity. The moon is said to veil Neptune here because average man is not ready yet for the extreme sensitivity and the potency of Neptune. The form is necessary, and the moon helps us develop and respond to our environment and circumstances, so we become capable of understanding our true spiritual selves and eventually God in manifestation. The switch is from lower sensitivity to a higher one. From a person who is isolated within the crowd, safe within their own little shell, to a spiritual hermit who's comfortable with the spiritual light of their soul. Cancer is developing the intuition and sensitivity, and its polar opposite is Capricorn, which develops spiritual awareness and eventually brings us to initiation. Together they are referred to as the gates into and out of incarnation. The axis and the balance that needs to be done here and their joint purpose is one of honing and nurturing that sensitivity and intuition of the soul in preparation for initiation. Okay, so that's the end of Cancer. Does anybody have any questions on that? Or Eva, did you have any comments?
Actually, I think I'd pass on this one. The only thing to really add to it, you've already covered it, is the fact that Cancer is water, and the water signs are the ones normally we associate with the intuition and the sensitivity to psychism, and it's ruled by both the moon and Neptune, the moon being more the lower intuition, which we call gut intuition, and then Neptune being the higher intuition. So you've pretty well covered that sensitivity that is so apparent in Cancer. And then you look at the doe. I mean, anybody who has driven and seen a deer, a doe, how they're so sensitive to the light and to the traffic, they literally freeze in their steps. There is that sensitivity within them too. They'll flee. They don't feel confident. Yeah, that's about it.
And then, I also wanted to point out the symbol, the symbology of this. We talk about Artemis representing the moon, and Neptune actually can represent the heart of the sun, and that is Apollo. So both of the rulers are represented there in the people that we see in this particular myth. So, okay, well then I'm going to turn it over to you, Eva, for the last part of this. If there's
okay, so we're not switching screens, are we?
Do you want to? We don't. No, I can go through it.
You can go through it, because I'm not going to stay long on any of these pages.
Just tell me
we'll just go through that. Okay, so here we are looking at the summary of the series of webinars that we've offered thus far. So look at the cute little things that my dear friend BL is doing. I'm so impressed, BL. It's lovely. Did she say exoteric or esoteric? Oh my God, I'm so confused. Excellent. Thank you so much. So, okay, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so we're asking you now to start observing the influences in your life. We've covered some of the main points, the outer life, which is the exoteric, and as well the inner life, which is more the inner thinking, the feeling that is less obvious in the outside world. Work with these for a while, become comfortable with them. As you now know that the ascendant by now is the sole purpose. And when you look at your chart, so you have an idea what the sole purpose is, but then in what way are you starting to work with that purpose? And always apply the qualities of that sign to yourself. To just read them as a laundry list does not help you to integrate it. So you look at these qualities of the ascendant and say, okay, now how am I appropriating some of these characteristics into my life? Because the ascendant also rules the first house. Whatever is on the ascendant, it rules the first house. And the first house, even in ordinary astrology, represents our identity, our body and our identity. So invariably, we do demonstrate the qualities of that ascendant in our personality. We appropriate it, and they kind of work through the personality. So it's not like the ascendant is a very separate entity saying, okay, this is sole purpose and it's only sole purpose. It's not. It's a lot more than that. So again, apply your individual behaviors and see if you're incorporating those qualities. A little hard for you, Michael, because you've got 3 Geminis there, I know. So the sun being the personality, you know what DK tells us about the sun, that the sun is our problem in this life. Think about that. The sun is really our problem. Why is it our problem? Is it in fact cooperating with the soul? Is it a vehicle for the soul? Why would it be a problem? Think that out. And then the moon, as you know, is the past, the lines of least resistance. It's called the prison of the soul. And so we as aspirants and disciples, are we living our moon? Is the moon the focal point of our behavior? And many people don't move out of their moon. Remember, it's the default. The default is always the moon. We come back to the way the qualities of the moon are. It's what our security is. It's what makes us feel good. It's they often say that if you're going to get a gift and you give the person a gift that is that resonates with what the moon either element is or quality is, it's going to make the person feel really good. So think this out as well. How do you move through your moon? Now, the 7 rays and how they work through the planets and the signs, and whether they are in your constitution or not is a good thing to see. Do you use any of those rays that are found? Many times, what we have all found is that the rays of the astrology either complements your constitution, the rays of your constitution, or it underlies. In other words, it helps with your rays of the constitution. But usually there's a little bit of overlap. So as mentioned, positive and negative traits of the planets and the signs, how do they impact you? And how do these extra lessons that Hercules has had to learn really relate to what you already know about the signs? So patterns of our moon, the sun sign labor, and the ascendant labor. We may not have covered them yet. Observe these influences in your life and those around you. So become what we call an esoteric reader, one who starts to look at life with the eyes of esotericism. Okay, we can move on. It's all about a learning experience. So we are here to live, to learn, to face tests and trial. Did you think for 1 minute this was going to be easy, an easy life? It's never like that. So we experience life as a myriad of cycles going on. There's overlapping, there's interacting with various cycles, and all of that influences our lives every single day. They impact both our exoteric life as well as stimulating our inner life. Again, if you can become the observer as you move through your day, how great would that be? These are rhythmic lifetime experiences designed to create crises in your life, to shake things up. And we all know that we haven't really wanted this, or we haven't asked for these crises, but they are opportunities. And soul knows better what it is that we need to work on, and therefore has given us those opportunities. They're designed to help us grow and to expand our consciousness. How often I have spoken to people and they say, there's no way I would have chosen this for myself. Well, we did. So we look at the bigger picture, understand the underlying energies of your natal chart. If you know how to work with transits and progressions, that's another element to looking at the chart. And can you identify the astrological energies that need to be cultivated to be balanced, as BL was pointing out, balancing the axis? What is the opposite of your ascendant? What is the opposite of your sun sign, as well as the moon? Can that be balanced in some fashion? You look at what does each sign need, and usually it's in the opposite. Okay, we move on. So this is more like a laundry list, and you can use this when you start working on your presentation. So you have some of the exoteric traits versus the esoteric traits, and all the signs are here. I will not go over all of that. I'm going to leave that to you. So we have all 12 signs here. It's things we've already covered, things that by now you may know quite well. So
and you will get copies of the slides, so you'll have these. to work with.
Perfect. Okay, so like you already know, there are virtues and vices of the rays, or we can call them strengths and weaknesses. And by now, you should be quite familiar with them. And again, first of all, see the ray in the astrology, like the 3 luminaries. What rays do they convey? And then see, do you use any of these strengths, or do you use some of the weaknesses? And we all do a little bit of both. And you can go through all those 3 luminaries and just see which strengths do you use, which weaknesses do you use, and what is it that you need to do in order to spiral it up so that a weakness can become a strength. Okay, so you have this list here, and I'm not going to go over all of that. The other thing that you all learned is to see the houses. Although many esotericists feel that the houses are the least important, you know what? I've really come around with that. I used to think that as well, and I realized that the houses represent the arena or the field or the area in which we work out our lives. So they are important. So all of this is important, believe it or not. I don't think any one is more than the other, with the exception of the ascendant, because that has to do with the soul purpose. So again, the east is opposite to what we think of the east. The east is where the ascendant rises. And then we look at these houses or arenas. And this is supposed to be what traditional astrology teaches us. We will see how, if you just go back a bit, just go back one more time. If we look at the traditional house, let's say for the first house, it says its appearance, its temperament, its ego, its identity. And I kind of covered that a little bit before. So now we'll go into the esoteric. So we're going to spiral that up. It becomes more esoteric. Can we see how because this is where the ascendant sits, right on the cusp there, it then has to do with our soul purpose, the ray of the soul, and it, of course, is normally led by Aries. It's the Aries house, and Aries, as we know, rules the head. So hence, it does have something to do with the head and the center and the head. So you could apply the head center, maybe even the ajna, things like that. Okay, so you get an idea. Like, I'm looking at the 7th house here. The 7th house is normally ruled by Libra. What you know about Libra? Libra is about right relations. This is about relationships. Most people that look at only Orthodox astrology would never think in terms of right human relationships for Libra. They would just think about who is going to be my partner, and who do I love, and how do I get along with this person, which is really relationships. So, the umbrella of it is really right relations on all levels and with all. Okay, we're going to move on. You'll look at the exoteric, and then look at the esoteric, and just see how they do correspond a little bit. It's just a little finer, a little more inner, and a little deeper as we move to the esoteric. So here, a little summary of all the signs, the exoteric ruler as well as the esoteric ruler. You are given, in Aquarius, you are giving Saturn and Uranus, and Saturn is the older thinking. Before Uranus was discovered, Saturn was the ruler. But when those that know the decadence, they still use Saturn as a decadent rather than Uranus. So we have to always look at the two. And when it comes to Pisces, it's Jupiter is the one that decay gives us, and Neptune is the one that Orthodox astrology looks at. And I think what he says, being decay, is that Neptune is more societal, whereas Jupiter is more personal. So just keep that in mind. Let's just look at Scorpio. Again, we have 2 there for Scorpio. Mars is what, again, the Tibetan has given us Mars, and Pluto is, again, societal. Everybody thinks in terms of Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, but they are both. So there you go. Okay, I think we're good on this slide. Now, I'm assuming you put that in for BL for me to just walk people through what to look at when they do their chart. Is that what we want to do with that?
Yeah, here, let me go back to it, and then we'll discuss our roles.
Right. So, for example, you would look here at a Cancer rising, and then you would discuss, if this was your chart, how a Cancer rising or an ascendant of Cancer, in what way does that soul purpose play out for you? Okay, and again, you've got to make it personal. You cannot just use a laundry list, because it would then apply to everybody that has Cancer rising. You've got to turn it and look at yourself. In what way are you using Cancerian qualities that you've appropriated into your personality to help you with your soul purpose? Make sense? Same thing with the sun. The sun here is in Pisces. It's also in the 8th house. So that has a bearing. So you would then look at, what is Pisces about? And again, we all have the same notes that are handed out to everybody. So we have the laundry list of the sun in Pisces. How does that play out for you? And in this particular case, in this chart, there are a lot of planets in Pisces. So that person can't get away from Pisces, because it would also be the way the mind thinks, because Mercury's right next to it. It would also be the intuition and the belief system. Again, you've got that with Neptune there, and you've got Venus there. So, and Chiron. So you've got 2, 4, 5 planets, counting Chiron as a planet here, in the sign of Pisces. So that person really lives a very Piscean-like existence. So you would then look at both the 8th house and the 9th house, because how do you separate the two, you know? How do you separate the way you think and the way you really are, because they're so closely related? So that person would have to talk about both. And then we would look at the moon. The moon here is in Taurus, and it's in the 11th house. So again, what are the qualities of the moon, and how do I work with that quality? And how natural is it for me to fall back to moon qualities or habits? So those are the 3 luminaries that require a little talk on. And then if you feel up to it, then you could look at some of the angles or some of the relationships between the signs and the planets. So we've learned that there are trines. The trines, you can see the triangles there. So you may want to talk about the obvious ones as they fill in. Well, these ones go to the ascendant. So then what would you say about from the ascendant down to Jupiter, and from Jupiter up to Chiron? And then if it affects Chiron, generally speaking, it's probably going to affect all of that Piscean grouping called stellium. So you would talk a little bit about that grand trine. You have other trines here between Pluto and the moon. You would talk a little bit about that. And again, and if that's as far as you want to go, that's okay too. If you want to go a little further, you would look then at some of the squares, and you do have squares between other planets, but they're not related to the 3 luminaries. That's only if you want to venture into a little bit more discussion on that. Right now, that is all that will be expected of you. And for those of you that have done this with us in the past, you are welcome to do this again. If you feel you'd like to go deeper, you can go deeper. If you feel that you would like to work with progressions and transits, then all you'd have to do is put out an email to BL, and she would send you a copy of your transits and your progressions, and you can work with that. It's entirely up to you. We don't want to put any pressure on anybody. Just to familiarize you with the three luminaries, how they work out for you in your life, how you see them in the chart. That's the main thing. So you've got your ascendant, your sun, and your moon. I think that's clear, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. So here's what our roles will be in chart delineation. We will be assisting where the planets are situated. So you will. What do you mean here? We will do that. This is what they.
I'll send them the chart that has the little tabulations down at the bottom,
Right.
so they can see the modes, they can see the quadrants, the signs, and everything. Just a quick synopsis of the chart.
Perfect, perfect. And you as the student need to do a little bit of research. Now, you'll write things up, right? You'll prepare an astrological profile using the ascendant, the sun and the moon, how they work out for you both exoterically and as best you can esoterically with the esoteric rulers, which I didn't touch on when we looked at the chart before. And also the rays, do those rays play out for you? And you'll send that in probably to BL, and BL will help you with that if it requires any help. And then when you feel it's completed, you will do the presentation on the webinar so that everybody hears what you're presenting. And then this is just for us, those attending the webinar, and anyone that would like to comment can ask questions, they can, and then BL and I can maybe help delineate the chart a little further. So for those of you who are interested, you're going to get a reading. You know, everybody wants a reading. You'll get a reading from us. So that's kind of cool, isn't it? So yeah, that's really what we would like to do. So we need you to volunteer. This is what you need to send in. See down at the bottom, you have BL's email address. Send it in to her because she's so much better at this than I am. She will create the chart for you. She'll send it out to you. And for those of you that we're not familiar with, how much astrology have you studied? Was it exoteric and esoteric, or a little bit of both? So send us a little bit of a self-profile that you can get from a Great Quest or Quest Universal or any other study group that you have done, especially for some of you new people. What is your occupation? And you know what? It always helps us to see how your occupation may be reflected on the chart or may be reflected in your rays. I always find that very interesting to see. And is there an area of focus you want us to look for in your chart? That is an important thing. So if you're going through a difficult time, it's worth mentioning what is it there that could be giving me a hard time, or if you want to know what it is, what's your next step ahead, we can try to help you with that. You know, am I fulfilling my soul purpose? We can try to look a little deeper at that. So those are little hints as to what we would like you guys to think about. If there's nothing further, are there any questions on any of this?
I don't see any yet, but what I want to say is that our next webinar is going to be on the 4th of August, and at that webinar, I will cover the Leo labor, and then both Eva and I will delineate our own chart for you. So we'll go through these kind of things that we're asking you to do for our own charts for you. And then we'll start with the first guest presenter in September, whatever that first weekend is in September. See if I can figure that out.
Yeah, because I'm going to be going to Brazil.
It looks like the 1st of September.
I won't be back. I'm going to Brazil at the end of August. and I don't think I'll be back by then. So, so I do I have it
We'll
even
have to
in
work
here?
that out.
Yeah. So yeah.
And I think that's probably Labor Day weekend too, so it
It
might
is. It
be a
may not be the
holiday.
best weekend. So we might have to do the. No, I don't come back until the 11th.
Okay. We may have to do the 15th,
So,
but
so
our
you
webinar
may
schedule
want
is
to do.
so aggressive, we may not be able to do one in September.
Right. And if not, and if you do choose a date where I'm not here, you can be the first to present your chart without me. So, you know, you'll have to look a little carefully with Joe and just see what's available and what's not. And if we
Right.
can't do it in September, we can't. We got to stay flexible.
Yeah, and what I plan on doing is, you know, we'll do the Leo labor in August. I have a Leo sun, so I think it will be appropriate. And
Mhm.
then the next webinar will do one labor at the beginning of the webinar, and then we'll have two guest presenters for however long it takes. And if we don't have that many intrepid volunteers, then I'll probably do another group of 4 labors to finish the labors up in this smaller, shorter format here. So.
Okay, so yeah, we'll just play it by ear. We'll see, and yeah, we're just going to encourage you to be volunteers. It's not that scary. There's a couple of people already on this webinar that have offered that before, and I know Yvonne and Michael have done that, and it went really, really well, I thought. So Yvonne has her hand up.
I wondered the time element on it. I'm volunteering because it's a good review for me, because I don't do much astrology aside from this. I haven't done it for years because in Quest Universal we don't do astrology. But I vaguely remember, you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we have to time it. So is that a time element there?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You know
Yeah,
what?
time to present.
Whatever. Yeah, something like that. Whatever you feel comfortable that you need to cover it. We don't need to hear a whole life story. I know we've had a couple of people in the past who went on and giving us their whole life story. We don't need to hear all of that. We just need to hear the experiences pertaining to what it is that you're needing to cover. You know, like the sun sign and how it's playing out for you and so on.
Okay.
So I don't want to limit you to 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, because then we're going to step in and we're going to be doing a little bit more. And since it's not a big group, I think I'm going to suggest we be very open and flexible with that. How about you, BL? Do you think we need to really limit it?
No, just not an hour. Nobody plan on an hour, please.
Right. Right.
Okay.
There's not a large group here, so I just, you know, do be in your comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, I volunteer. I need to review.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, that's all we have for you today.
Oh,
Unless you.
Michael wants to say something.
Yeah, you might want to check the constant contact and what's going out about this webinar, because, you know, I check into the Morya Federation general information quite frequently, and that's the only place that I'm getting the information on where to register for the webinar.
You mean to tell me that you don't get this via the campus? It
No,
comes out on campus.
well,
You're not getting it on campus?
I haven't been getting it through campus mail, no.
Okay, well then you need to check to find out what's going on with your campus mail, because I only advertise it on the student union, and so it should come to your and I always post it about a week before the event. So it should come directly to you through the student union. It is not supposed to be advertised through Constant Contact or any of those, although I know that Joe sends out a master schedule and it comes out that way, and it's not supposed to, because this webinar is only open to students of Morya Federation, because we can't accept 100 people in doing this.
Right.
Now,
I
that
understand
said,
that,
I do in fact go out via Constant Contact and the student union when I send the announcement that says it's posted on Makara. Anybody will be able to watch it after the fact. They just can't participate unless they're a student with the Morya Federation during the live
Yeah,
event.
I wasn't
can you
sure if it
imagine us?
was, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was something that has been lost in my mail from the student union, or if there are other students not getting it as well.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, and we don't know that, do we?
Well,
I get it.
I guess we.
Digest. I get it on Campus Digest.
okay.
I know I do.
I do. I do.
I do
Okay.
too.
So we, you know what, here's a thought, BL. Maybe on student union, put out just put out a statement saying that if they're not getting this and you're putting it on student union, they wouldn't get the announcement anyway. See, I'm trying to think, what can they receive that asks them, are you getting this? Or do you need to check in with Kay or whoever is looking after this? I don't know.
Yeah, and
how do you read?
sometimes students accidentally knock themselves off. I mean, I can go in for Michael and I can look and see if he's still enrolled in the student union. And then the other thing is, people get their Campus Digest, they can go in and they can adjust the settings so that they don't see the whole announcement. All they see is the title of it. But yeah, you should be getting all of the student union announcements, Michael.
Maybe something happened without my knowing it, or I did something inadvertently. Who knows?
But whatever research you're doing to find out when we're on, you're on all the time with us. So thank you.
And you're a good one. We want you to present because you're the one that has the triple Gemini. So it's always fun to look at that.
So yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, so you need to still send in your info. BL may have that in her list of participants. I'm sure she's far more organized about all of that than I am, but please send it in again, and it'll be, number one, a reminder. Number two, she'll have it right in front of her.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you so much,
So Yvonne,
both of you.
Thank you. Yvonne has her hand up again.
She's self-muted. Okay, there you go.
No, I'm unmuted now. I think this is such a valuable thing that you are doing. I wish it were advertised more so more people would participate and take advantage of it. I don't know what the problem is. I would think all students in Morya Federation would love to do this. I just don't understand the poor response. When Michael has these advertised, I'm always getting webinars. There's 10 reminders every day on all the webinars, but not this one. We need more people.
There should have been reminders on that, because once you register yourself, I have Constant Contact set up to send a reminder a week out, 2 days out, 2 hours out. So you should have gotten those kind of reminders there.
Okay, that one
I don't get those kind of reminders actually.
I'm sorry, they come from GoToWebinar.
How about advertising it more for the Morya students?
Well, I can announce it 10 days out, and then I can do a reminder, 3 or 4 days out.
Yeah, I think it's so
yeah,
valuable.
I think a separate announcement should go out to say that we are now open to anyone that wants to do a presentation, their astrological presentation, so that they know that they can actually do that. And then it'll be up to them to try to fill in whatever they know. One of our faculty, and this should go to both faculty and to student, not just to the student union or not just to students, because I know Frida came on last time, and then I have spoken to her subsequently, and she was raving about your presentation, VL. She thought what you presented was so, now she's not brand new at this, and she thought it was so good. It helped her cement a lot of things that she needed to, and now she's faculty. So I think faculty should become aware of this as well. Now, obviously she did. She read it somewhere, she got an announcement somewhere, but I don't know if faculty is even bothering to look at this.
Well, that's the thing. There are so many announcements going out now with the various programs that sometimes it's easy to overlook one in the flood of announcements. So, you know, there's all the Ask announcements, which there's 5 of those a week, and then Michael, the commentaries that he's doing, and our webinar series and all the other webinar series. So, but yeah, you know, we put it on the Student Union, and that should go to every single member of the Morya Federation. But anyway.
Now, Janade, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I want to welcome you to this webinar. And I know that I'm working with you and Tanya in the translation of English to Portuguese, because I'll be presenting again in Brazil. So I think this is your first time joining us. Can we put you on off mute so that you can actually say hello to us? Is that okay? There you go. So welcome. And again, if you would like to present your chart, we would love to work with you. And now you haven't attended some of the past astrological webinars we've done, although they're all available on, is it Makara BL that they're available on?
Yes, they are. And Zenaida is a student in Great Quest. So she's been studying. She's just been getting into astrology a little bit there too. So
don't hesitate, Janade, to offer us the simplest approach to this. We're not looking for trained astrologers. You know, this is to help you and for us to work with you. Are you there?
maybe later. So, okay, well, I think we've covered everything, and I will go out with a special announcement on the Student Union. Michael, I will check and find out, make sure that you are, in fact, there. Oh, Zenaida says thanks. So.
Oh, okay, so there's a question mark there. Okay.
Right. Okay, all right, so, and Helen, we hope that you'll participate with us too. So I'm going to unmute everybody right now so that we can all say goodbye. I can't unmute you, Michael. You have to unmute yourself. There we go. And Yvonne, you have to unmute yourself too. So there we go. Ooh, goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Now you know why everybody has to be on mute. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. So will my recording just stop automatically? I guess it will.